Hello, and welcome to the Grow Places podcast, where we explore the virtuous circle of people, growth, and place. Brought to you by Grow Places and hosted by our founder, Tom Larsson.
Paul, thanks very much for joining me today.
Nice to see you, Tom.
Good. Thanks for having me at your offices. I think we're on the third of the floors now that you've got here at Moorlands, aren't we?
Yeah, we've got 3 floors here.
Yeah. And how's everything going?
Yes, good. We've had a good year. So after sort of slowly start seeing future being a bit brighter, which it's been hard the last 5 years.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I was wondering, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of things. Really, I'm really grateful that you've come on. But maybe just like as a framing question. So, if you were to compare your latest commission and the environment and the kind of relationship with the client and the brief, etc., and you were to take yourself back to maybe your first commission all those years ago, what the similarities come to mind? What's different? How do you see the world now?
Wow, we're going back a long way there, Tom, don't forget. So we're going back about 35 years because we started our practice in 1989. So those days planning applications were like some existing drawings, some proposed drawings, and about a one-page statement. So although the projects we were doing were pretty much small projects then, I think the big difference, I mean, obviously we work at scale now, one of the few practices who can sort of get planning but also build big buildings. And then by big, I mean 200 to 400 million pound projects. So they're quite a handful. What I would say, the role as an architect has got so much more technical now. It's so driven by regulations. It's so driven by almost everyone needing a certain expertise and the sort of idea of the general practitioner, which is sort of, I suppose, what I am, is very different, the scenario now. And the other thing is, I think planning, I'm not one who moans about planning, but I think planning has become very complex. I mean, you've probably seen it yourself in projects, the access statement, design access statement that's 1,000 pages deep that no one really reads, but it's there in case anyone wants to. And things like that, I think, have escalated too much. But on the whole, I think it's that thing where you could be more of a generalist, and now you really do. There's so much of the work we do where you need so much experience before you start.
Yeah, totally. And that point about 1,000-page report, that's a big reason why we're doing this, because if you can talk to the author of the report and let them actually express themselves in a much more accessible way, that's much as informative and useful for most people than the report. And so we're trying to do that across multiple things, consultation and projects, as well as these kind of conversations. And
I think I try to say to my teams now, can you make it as short as you can? There'll be a prize for the shortest one this year. So that's something that I think it's great you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And so that that regulatory pressure, we've touched on it, so let's dive into that straight away. But that idea of kind of design freedom and expression within what you do, how do you see that you still have a ability to do that in the current system, or do you feel that it's much more constrained now?
I think even from the early days, we thrived on quite technical constraints. We always quite enjoyed that. We enjoyed rules. If a client has some guideline, we quite enjoyed that, and then try to get something out of them. It's a bit like when we started, say, things like design and build were relatively new, and a lot of the older architects were sort of slagging it off, saying design and build is terrible, it needs to be traditional. And we were like, well, we can build and we'll do it. And we learned how to do that and worked the techniques of how to get the best out of a design and build contract with a builder who is not always interested in you. But we learned techniques to sort of, take them to the pub, chat with them, sort of talk about their kids and actually become friends with them. And then I suppose we were then able to sort of be treated in a better manner, and we got more out. So a lot of our early projects I often think they're pound busters because they don't look like the budget they are. They're much cheaper than they are. So those were different rules. But I think with reg, whether it be escape distances or the sort of different elements of building regs we have now, we quite like manipulating that. And we do design quite simple buildings, but they always are. They're quite simple shapes. We're interested in value for the clients, the plan area versus the surface area, not getting too complicated, but trying to use the right materials, things so that the buildings last. So I think I mean, it is harder. I'd say what's changed, I think housing is so prescriptive now and is so difficult to be innovative. If you have maybe a local authority as client, you can push it a bit because their ground rules aren't quite the same. If you have a housing developer, the whole appraisals and all of the regulations lead you to exactly the same cookie cutter flat that every architect in London does. So that's hard. What I didn't expect is offices are now by far the most innovative projects we do in terms of sustainability, in terms of clients wanting to go for it. And this is because it's driven by tenants employ, the best young people from universities or from wherever. And they are very passionate about sustainability. So they need a building that's highly sustainable and something now about going back to work, something that is a different environment and isn't sort of corporate. So I think offices have really changed over the last, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, we started doing things like the T building and sort of recognized that people didn't like these corporate spaces anymore. And that really escalated into other projects.
Yeah. Well, we're actually based in the T building, and we used it as a example to this day on our work at Truman, and I think it's a testament to that approach. And these are kind of your words, you said, but the kind of like the everyday, the ordinary, the kind of offices, schools, housing, and obviously you won the Sterling Prize for a school, and so why have you sort of fell into or purposefully ended up in doing ordinary, in inverted commas, buildings and typologies?
Yeah, well, I think we were, when we were at architecture school in the mid-'80s with David Dunster, who was our tutor, what was the book, Architecture in the City, Aldo Rossi's Oppositions book? It was all about sort of the everyday buildings, the background buildings of the city. So even from those early days at the Barley, our final project, and we were a group then, 4 of us, was 4 office buildings actually down the road by St. Paul's Cathedral. And we designed each of the buildings separately and called it the Fifth Man, and the space was the Fifth Man. And that was about an obsession about everyday buildings, how you design quite classic buildings. We liked the work of people like Alto, Wagner, that were buildings that didn't look like they'd age. So I suppose there was interest there. And over the years, I suppose, we often talk now about it being the ordinary buildings and turn them into extraordinary buildings. And so it's always been there. It doesn't mean to say, we have over the years done art galleries, doing theatres, but we do have particular interest in that. And I don't mind that.
No, not at all. And
I think they're the backdrop to the city. They're the backdrop to people's everyday lives. And sometimes the architectural world's a bit sniffy about them, particularly office buildings, which I don't get, to be honest. But more people are housed in office buildings, working and trying to make their environment great. It's just as important as doing school. Anyway,
yeah. No, I agree. And well, that is just our interest really at Grow Places is exactly that. It's the kind of the ordinary places, ordinary buildings, but not that in a negative sense. In any sense, it's about everyday life, as you say. And and so those founding principles then of the business. I know you've kind of very recently, haven't you, in the past few weeks, you've kind of gone through a slight restructuring here. And how do you see the founding principles of the business, kind of those values, those principles translating every day?
Yeah, well, I suppose don't forget, I've known Simon, best friends, since I was 18. So met him in 1980, and Pete and John met at the same time. Then we all met each other in 1984. I know that sounds horrifically long time to most people. So we've been close for 40 years. We've run the business since 1989 for 36 years, the four of us. So it is a massive deal to enlarge our board because we've sort of ruled the roost for 35 years. But we haven't done a bad job. We took it from four of us for, Charlotte Street, 1989 to 450 and doing world, business all over the world. So I think we've done a good job, but it's really important to us that the future sees, the people in the firm see a really serious future and opportunities for them in the future. We have no intention of retiring, but it would be irresponsible of us for holding such a big company without having any plan at all. So that's to me, that's a really excitement. And it's, all the people we've promoted have been with us an awful long time. And some of them, I think from Susie has been with us 32 years to, I think Hazel's been with us for 20 years. So there's an awful, these people haven't just suddenly come about. They're part of why we're so successful.
Yeah. And do you have any feel for why people stay for such a long time? What people have bought into in terms of the work and the vision?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things there. I mean, people often ask me what's the favourite building that, I've been involved with or done. And I often say, well, I'll say something. But often I'll say it's the firm we created, the firm we designed. And we always tried to create a firm that we wanted to work in. And, when we were young, when we left the Bartlett, we went to BDP, worked there for 3 years. And, I've always been fond of BDP. They looked after us an awful lot when we started. They're a great firm to work for. They really believed in well-being and looking after people, quite ahead of their time, to be honest. So things like that influence us. Plus, generally, we like people, and we get on with people, and we always sort of try and think about those elements. So I suppose that's sort of, I think, why people just don't really leave. Not many do. And then the second part of it is that what we recognised early on, there weren't many big firms who were sort of doing work that might get in the magazines or win awards. A lot of the big firms were not, when we started this is. So we thought, couldn't you do a firm that's big and also win awards every, we've won, I think it's 67 RIBA awards, which is, so I only know that because we had to go for a bid the other week, and I said, can we just say how many we've won? Because it was sort of in Cambridge. So, I think that people like winning on buildings that are high profile. People like the experience that they get from our firm and the way we manage people. And, we look after people a lot. There's a lot of well-being things to, whether it be yoga, free fruit, the Thursday night drinks, lectures, jogging clubs, all of the things that we do. We do an awful lot of work with charity around here for local charities. And I think all of those things are, we have big parties that twice a year where we try and make it very, very inclusive for everyone. So I think that's probably why people stay. And sorry, the other thing is we feel have always have a real responsibility to try and get good fees and pay architects well. Now, there was a sort of period a few years ago where there was some suggestion that big firms treated architects badly. The reality is the big firms treat people the best. And I feel a firm of our scale has a real responsibility to try and look after its people and make sure they are paid well. Because if we can't do it, to be frank, who the hell can?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I imagine as well the fact that you build things. That sounds maybe slightly perverse to talk about an architect who builds things, but actually it's not always the case, is it? That you actually see vision turn into reality. And that goes back to everything you're saying about projects being deliverable, working to clients' objectives, understanding different people's priorities, and then actually being able to realise things. And so yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that about what makes a project deliverable, what makes a project actually happen and get off the drawing board.
Yeah, I think from our beginnings, we always were really obsessed about building something, however way it was, or whatever, because we didn't know enough. When we left BDP when we were 27, I'd never done an AI. We didn't really know much. So we were building, often very, very small projects, whether it be back extensions or other elements. And we were really obsessed by trying to do that. We'd also recognized that a lot of firms who were maybe becoming high profile in the early 90s couldn't make it to the next scale of buildings. And I think it was about their technical know-how. So I'd done my year out for Simon's dad at YRM, and there was a chap called Victor Kite who worked for Simon's dad. He'd retired. So we got him back in to be our sort of guru in terms of detailing and how to run a project, in the early 90s. And he taught us how to do working drawings well, how to talk to a contractor, how to detail elegantly and timelessly. And I think he had a massive impact on our early work, because even some of our smaller jobs from the 90s are detailed incredibly well for the sort of the stage we're at in our careers. So it's always something we've been obsessed by. There was definitely, you went around them, but a lot of architects were so sniffy about design and build. We were like, well, look, we can build. It's okay. Let's get going. And of course, now no one does traditional contract, or hardly anyone does. And actually, almost no architects can do it. It's so hard now. But it's, I think that's really where it came from, that obsession. The more we can build, the more we'll know. And out of that, you learn, when we do schools, we'd learn the contractor would hate a staircase we'd design, and then we say, well, how would you do it? You then learn some techniques of him that's cheaper. And then if you look at our schools, all the staircases are the same in terms of, or that sort of idea about how you make something and how you make it cost effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've talked quite a lot about the deliverability from, whether it's creating a great culture that allows you to deliver internally or with contractors and partners and design and build. And can you talk a little bit about your kind of insights and learnings about the relationship with the client and with local authorities and other kind of stakeholders, and how you see your ability to talk different people's languages and to make projects happen in that respect?
Yeah, of course. Now we're incredibly lucky. We have, most of the very best clients in the country that we work for. And that's important, because probably 60% of our work is repeat business. And I think if you talk to most architects of some scale, by that I mean 40, 50 people, they'll probably find the same. So having that repeat business allows you to build up a fantastic relationship with clients. And you can be honest and transparent. So those are the clients we really enjoy working for. So we're very lucky. I think in the early days, you're doing different sort of projects. You might be doing a school and you find a really passionate head teacher. We did a lot of schools between, I think, 2000, 2010. And they were directly related to how good the head teachers or the leadership team was. And so because those are very passionate people. And I think we enjoy working for passionate people. And if you look at the people we work for now, whether it be Stanhope or British Land or Edge or Hub, these are all people who are driven, who have quite small leadership teams, but are very, very driven. And so I think that's something that's always come across. But I think the other thing is that, number one, we often explain our ideas in quite a straightforward way. There isn't a sort of an architectural layer that goes into it. It's almost trying to imagine you're presenting to your mum as well as your client, and so it comes across really clear. Now that can sometimes, which is very visual in terms of diagrams or drawings. And I think that's important to clients. And the other thing is we listen. The most important thing is we listen. So if someone doesn't like red, we won't throw our toys out the pram and say it's got to be red. And it's amazing how many architects are like that still. But I think that's the one thing we were different. I think because we grew up in a total recession, 1990, that first year was absolutely horrendous. We never had the chance to even be arrogant. But the people before us all felt like they were rather that their status was so much higher. And I think we felt like outsiders from the beginning. A lot of my age group, a lot of the firms from my age group are much more modest, whether it be McCreen or Lavington or, Serges and Bates. They're not people who have that sort of arrogance of the people before us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I attest to that. And everything you're saying, having worked directly with you really comes through, when we've been the client-architect relationship, absolutely. And so what, are there any kind of anecdotes or stories that maybe come to mind about whether it's a conversation with a client or with a local authority or with a planner that kind of come to mind over the years that you go, God, that was quite a new way of thinking about something, or that was something which really sort of stuck with us as we've gone on our journey?
From a client
or a planner, or kind of whatever comes to mind, really, to be honest.
Probably lots over the years where, we've enjoyed lots of really strong dialogues with the planning authorities in London, and certainly, the key planners that we work with, who often have very astute observations about the work you might be doing, and often about a detail that maybe we hadn't really thought about. And I think when you do big buildings, you need people to comment on them because there's a lot of the building. So, and often it's quite easy to leave some sort of corner slightly unresolved. So but in terms of whether or not there's a particular thing that, it's funny, I worked on the Millennium Dome with David Putnam. It was in Tim Pine it was work. We're designing the work and learn zone. And we had, who is it, Bruce McLean, who did With Nail and I.
Yeah.
Bruce Robinson, isn't it? Did With Nail and I. And he did the film inside our work and learn zone. And David Putnam was describing what he wanted out of the architecture. And he said, well, what I want is, it's like the bit in Close Encounters when the aliens come out and it all shines incredibly brightly and then suddenly you see the aliens coming through. So I want the end of this film to be like that. And then the doors open and then we go into this forest of computers as it was. And, but we were trying to have a dialogue about how to make the film that was being shown more real. And I suggested that someone in the audience dressed as a school kid, because it was all about school assembly, and would come on stage and be real. And he said, that's a brilliant idea. So that was really, it was working with something in a very different genre, because we did do quite a lot of exhibitions in the early days, and they were great fun. But I suppose I really enjoyed working. He was he was always and I think, learn from him, he's always no, you can never say never. You can always do something. You can always make it work. And I think if there's one thing we hate in our firm is people who are half pint empty. It's always, quite often Simon and I and our directors are the ones saying, no, we can do it, or we can make it, because that's something clients really want. Yeah.
So if you were to take that kind of that optimistic glass half full mindset then, and you were to think about some of the challenges we're facing at the moment in the industry, and to think, in that mindset about kind of how we unlock some of this in a way to kind of to get things moving, whether it's housing or planning or development, whatever comes to mind, really.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard times, but we've been through loads of really hard times. I think for us it was harder in 1990 when the world collapsed and there was no work. We would go to the pub on the Friday night where BDP, we used to go to when we were at BDP, and they'd be laying 30 people off every week for months. we couldn't lay anyone off. There was only 4 of us. There was no work, and we were kids, we didn't know anyone, and that was horrendous. And I think I don't think there's ever a good time for new businesses, but I think now we have this world where I feel like with a bit of a shake it could get going. But there's always something in the future. So at the moment, it's obviously the budget next week. Is that going to get the property industry going? Nothing works. Nothing's worked for about 3 or 4 years. Nothing can get built apart from student accommodation or co-living. They're the ones that seem to be doing really well. But like everything, it was labs, wasn't it? Life sciences. a few years ago, and then that sort of bubble's slightly burst on that at the moment. So I think it's just and therefore, if you're starting, it is incredibly difficult because there's nothing you can rely on. The big difference for us is years ago we used to be able to rely on, here's the money coming in, there's planning, go straight ahead to do construction drawings, then we're off. And now every work stage there's a pause. There's sometimes a new fee that needs negotiating, and you can't predict anything. So it's but I would say in the difficult times, we've always done well because I think we're incredibly experienced, and I think you will find the firms who are quite well known do well when things are bad because clients want something that's reliable. And I think, first of all, what clients want is people who get good planning permissions, and that's what we do. And lots of other firms, quite a few others in London, and they don't want to take a chance. So that's the harder thing. If you're trying to make a breakthrough, times like this, the clients are going to be much more conservative about the firms they might go for. So, when I look back at 2008, 2009, the crash, we lost 30 people. We're about 125 people then, and we lost 30. And then the following years, we just grew and grew and grew. Within 2 years, we were 200, and because we had clients who we understood value. And I think some of it is understanding, if you're adding something to the architecture, it has to add value for a client. It's gone are the days when architects can just do what they feel like. Well, they haven't been around for years, really.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that, and I think that's absolutely right. And then, so if you compare where we are now, then you've kind of sort of done it, but to those other tough periods, and you think about when the sort of curve turns upwards and how that feels and what kind of emerges. Do you feel like we're at that place soon in the UK, or do you think it feels a bit different this time? Or,
to be honest, Tom, it's felt the same for the last 5 years. It's felt like I could really get going here. And housing, we need it. 1.5 million home, we need it. Not enough affordable, not enough housing, private housing that people could afford either. And but it just seems that there's always something gets in the way. So, clearly at the moment it's construction costs and appraisals and borrowing that people can't get. And construction costs, I think there's contractors now contractors I've always found are the people who are the last people to understand that you better get a bit more competitive. Fees as architects have gone down continuously for the last 10 years, and you always think they'll go up again, but they don't really. So we have to pedal twice as fast. Computer programs come in like Revit that suddenly are meant to save you time, then that don't make any difference, cost you more. So it's sort of, I suppose it's, it's just one of those things that, I could see if the budget, if there's something sensible in the budget, the need for housing, and don't forget I was involved with, the Office for Place and a lot of things to do with trying to promote better designed homes. It should be an open door. I think Labour are doing some good things. Yesterday was about the stations, almost like it's compulsory to give planning for things. I think, they're trying to desperately get to a point, but the reality is house builders aren't going to want to build too much unless the market gets going again. And but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful towards the beginning of next year things will go and get going again. But I don't think we'll ever have what we had between like 2000 and 2008, where the world just went bonkers. And in a way, to a certain extent, we're still recovering from that because it went a bit too bonkers, where you buy a flat and then you'd sell it for almost twice as much 4 years later. In the end, that seemed great at the time, but it's been no good for anyone now.
Yeah, exactly. And well, hopefully we just don't get monetary policies that kind of force that thing to happen, but it's kind of looks good on the surface, but isn't in the long term. And you mentioned there, Paul, your role, your standing within the industry, and what that does outside the day job, whether it's your work in Liverpool or whether it's other things. So how do you see that kind of, whether you want to say position of influence or kind of opportunities for other influence within politics or industry? Do you see that as a big part of your personal sort of next few years or not?
I think it always has been. I mean, since we started, when we started, we were teaching at the Bartlett. We taught for the Bartlett, ran a unit there for 18 years. I still run the Bartlett's alumni sort of events. So Bartlett was something very important to us, and teaching was. We taught at Nottingham for a while, taught at Liverpool for a bit, Sheffield for a bit. So I think teaching was really important to us in the early days. It's Simon and I who ran the unit. Then we got really involved with Kay by different ways. I was very involved with school design and helped set up the design review panel for schools, which is a really key moment. One of the proudest things I've been involved with, because if you look back, how many schools won RIBA awards after the design review panel started was just remarkable. It was, I'm talking about between 2009 to 2014, and that panel affected school design, and that was directly from, at the time, Gordon Brown saying we need to get better schools. And then I carried on with the design council when Cabe took over, did a lot of design reviews. And then I suppose the last few years I was involved with Liverpool because I'm from Liverpool, so it's very nice. Steve Rotherham, the mayor, asked me to be a sort of design champion, which is more about championing architects in Liverpool. It's not about, I don't get involved with planning applications or design reviews. So I try and promote Liverpool practices and how good the firms are there, and try to do a few competitions to help them get work. Then I've been, I suppose, involved with government. So originally I was part of the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission. I always get the wrong way around, and there was this document called Living with Beauty that we put together with an amazing group of people. And, that document is, if you read that now, it's still very sensible related to planning and housing. That then turned into Office for Place, which Nicholas Boyd Smith was head of. And I was really interested in Nicholas because, he's very much one of those people who talked in everyday language about buildings, had an issue with the way architects spoke about it, the way design review panels were run. In a way, it felt, the people were insulted in some of those things, and made very, very good points about streets and trees and bins and housing. I was never totally on, that everything needed to be classical, but Nicholas wasn't either. He was a pluralist. So I thought, it was interesting being on a panel with him rather than with, I don't know, some really high architect with huge reputation. It was sort of, we were really interesting debates and how design codes could help, and how, what was important about new housing. And then I suppose also the last 5 years I've been a mayor's design advocate. So a lot of that was doing design reviews, which I enjoy design reviews. It's a bit like teaching again. I often feel it's quite a scheme either needs support or needs the architect replacing, but most of it needs support. And then most recently I've become the town architect for Croydon, a place we've done an awful lot of building. Well, with Stanhope all those years ago was one of my first buildings there. In fact, our very first building, a little doctor's surgery, was there. And that's been really enjoyable. It's just getting going. Croydon's been through a really hellish time, to be honest. And, if you look at Croydon's brick by brick projects were really innovative and so tragic that didn't quite work out. But its legacy is some great buildings. Unfortunately, a bit of a debt, but I think I wish more people would do that. So it's always been important, has been to Simon too, became president of the RIBA for a while. And so we've always felt that it gives us a bit of an objectivity about the work we do. And I think, it used to be the tradition that you would teach and then practice, but it hasn't with the generation below us, I don't think. I don't see them teaching much. But I'd say that's probably And it was Peter Cook who was head of the Bartlett. And I often say that going to all those crits, seeing all those great tutors, whether it be Neil McLaughlin or whoever they were, Neil Spiller, and seeing the work and listening to the way Peter talked about things was really influential on our early careers. And I suppose early on we were quite hard to pigeonhole us. And maybe that was something to do with the Bartlett. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to close then, Paul, I don't know to what extent you're a very kind of introspective person yourself, but what do you have a sense of kind of why you are where you are, why with the Fifth Man and all those other projects you were interested in the ordinary and the everyday, and why today you take care of cities and those kind of ordinary places? Do you have a sense of that?
Do I have a sense of...
Do you have a sense of why you do that personally? Like not for the business side, more for you as a person, why you have that sense of that?
Well, I suppose, I always feel we're very lucky doing the job we're doing. And from the earliest days, when you do a building, whether it be, one of our earliest ones was a little doctor's surgery, and you could see the delight in the doctors working there from then on. And then the people who were there when it used to be such a grotty place beforehand. And you think, well, this is quite amazing. You really are changing something. I remember one of our clients who was from was a counsellor in Lambeth. We did a school, Jubilee Primary School. It was one of our first bigger primary schools in the late 90s. And he told me that he'd been sacked because he'd stuck out for the school and moved somewhere else. And he drove his car into the car park opposite the school and looked at it and started crying. And I thought, that's architecture. My brother's a TV producer, and I always say, you can make people cry. We can't, but actually occasionally we have, and occasionally me. And so, but there's an emotion. We did a bereavement centre called the Older Centre on the road I used to live in Liverpool, where people who've lost a child either at birth or, go and need a sanctuary. And it's amazing going there now. It's like this idea of the secret garden, where everything looks into this secret garden, and people stay there for hours because they find it so peaceful. So I suppose it's something that I really enjoy. That's where schools were great, because often you'd see the results go up as well. So you'd see it wasn't just we weren't doing it to create a nice building. Actually, these kids were doing better. So, I mean, I think it's quite hard not to enjoy that and not want to achieve more in that way. But on another level as well, look, we enjoy the world of architecture. We enjoy, why I think awards and getting things published are really important, because the day we stop getting that is the day our firm is starting to slip in terms of design. And I'm always, people here get irritated with me that, we've got to be on top of our game, because there will be a queue of people trying to get into the clients we have, and we've got to always produce and do some good work. And that drive, and never feeling, the interest to me is it's always the next building we do will be the best one we do. And that's what keeps me going, really.
Paul, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a real privilege to have you on, and I really enjoy working together as we have done over the years. So thank you.
Well, it's lovely seeing you as well, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Grow Places podcast. For more information, visit growplaces.com and follow us at We Grow Places across all social channels. See you next time.